Welcome back, everybody. Well, what are we doing? Well, this is cleanup on aisle 9. We're just finishing up all the loose ends on the EFI conversion for the R5. And what it is we got a lot of stuff done, but we have to clean it up. As in, I finally got my tungsten so I can weld the crankshaft positioning wheel. And then we can set that up. I got to set top dead center. I'll show you that. I got to redo something on the intercooler and plus put the oiling system on the turbocharger. And if I look around and see anything else that I have to do, I'm going to do it. That's pretty much it. And that'll be it until I can get this motor in the car, because that's after we have it in the car, then I can start pulling apart all the wiring and doing all that stuff and the fuel lines and doing all that other fun stuff. But it's got to be warm to do it, because you have to remember, you don't want it to be cold, because whenever you touch 80s plastic, they just fall apart. That's what they do. Yeah, it's just the nature of the game, nature of the beast. But also, another thing I have a problem is it's all the ice and snow in front of it, and the two Jags, the two Fords, and the GTI that's sitting in front of the car that I have to move in order for me to actually get my tractor started, which in the winter it doesn't really do it, and to bring this thing up and put it in. But that's beside the point. Those are my problems. I have to wait till it's a little bit warmer to do it. Other than that, let's first thing to do is I'm going to bring you over here. I'll show you what I have to set this thing at the top dead center, and then we're going to set the camshaft wheel to the VR sensor and then actually trim out and figure out exactly where we're going to do the top dead center reference mark so we can set timing. All right, let me just go grab the stuff and we'll get right on it. Let's go. First things first, what do we have? We have to have a degree wheel to figure out where our top dead center is. What did I do? Well, this right here is proof that I built this. I didn't run through it. I didn't film it because I didn't think it was going to work. I wasn't sure. But this right here is proof. What it is that this right here, this is a degree wheel I just downloaded, just picked one of 100 off of the internet, downloaded it, printed it. This is the printer. This is the paper. Then I wanted to give it a cardboard backing to make it stiff. Right here, cardboard. And then I needed to put on the cardboard, on the back of it, magnets, so I can actually have it, stick to the actual motor and to the pulley. And what I use right here is these are refrigerator magnets from Rock Auto. You get them in every package. I got boatloads of them. So what I do, I took about a half dozen to maybe a little over, and I threw them in a bowl of water. And about 48 hours later, this is what you get. They come right off, no problem. Just scrape it off with a razor blade, and it worked really well. After that, here, let me put this over here. I built this. I went into the scrap pile and I found anything with a hole. That's it. Is it flat and does it have a hole that I can stick a socket through? And I said, well, that one's big enough. It should be okay. Then I took a piece of wire hanger like this and I TIG welded it to there because I need a little bit more practice. So what it does is it sits on here and doesn't move anywhere. It's actually kind of spring loaded. Then I took my refrigerator magnet home-built degree wheel, put that on like this, there, like that, and it sticks right there. This right here is just a piece of metal that I bolted onto the block, and I am going to, now that I know exactly the size of my degree wheel, I'm going to bend it down so we can get an accurate reading. First thing we have to do is we have to pull spark plug number 1 and make sure everything is at top dead center. So let's just do that now. Here in Renault speak, this right here is a spark plug wire. Pretty generic, nothing out of the ordinary, but down here is what's interesting. Let me pull it out. First things first, this is a set of pliers that I use for doing vacuum hoses. They're from Mac Tools. Actually, they work pretty good for these. This right here is just a spark plug extender. This screws on top of the spark plug where the wire fits on top here and just acts like pretty much just an extension of the spark plug all the way down. There's really nothing out of the ordinary about it. So let me pull the plug. That way we can get this thing completely set to top dead center. Next thing we have to do is we are going to be using a depth gauge, just like this, or a dial indicator that I use on my lathe. That'll determine exactly where top dead center is. First thing is, this is magnetic. We don't want it to move. So what do I have to do to make sure it doesn't move? I have to use this. This right here is just a steel plate that I'm going to bolt onto the middle bolt onto the that's on the cam or on the rocker cover, just so it sits down. And what I use to test it with, just an old push rod, because it won't damage anything when it goes down inside there. So pretty much there. It's only within a couple degrees of just the top portion of it. That's crazy. There is where it is flattened out. Right there is where it's flattened out. So we're going to set that to 0. Right there. There is where it goes back down. So it's 2 degrees of where the piston is up and the rod is going like this and just keeping it at top dead center. So we bring it back 1 degree. There is top dead center. So now we know exactly where top dead center is. The challenge is going to be keeping this pulley absolutely steady as we pull this thing off. And that's the only thing. So I'm going to get my impact gun and I'm going to pull it off really, really fast. Ah, we did it. It didn't move a smidgen. Oh, I love it. All right. I have to be very, very careful to get this thing off. Whew. Ah, that was nerve-wracking. Now we get to set this. Here's a tooth wheel right here. I marked it where exact top dead center is, so when I weld it onto it, it is top dead center. Here's a missing tooth right here. That's number 36. You count up 9 right here. Right in the middle of the VR sensor is tooth 9. Up here is where we're going to have our top dead center reference mark. I'm going to drill a hole, I think. That's what I think I'm going to do, but the first thing is, now that I have this all set, I got to pull this out. I got to pull this mount off in order to get this tooth wheel off. Then I'm going to clamp it together, put it on the bench, give it 4 really good tacks, because nothing's really being going on here, but the main thing is just to have it all equal and so it doesn't wobble. Let me pull this mount off and we can get this tooth wheel and bushing out so we can bring it over to the bench and weld it. We are exactly aligned with the mark right there. Now we don't want it to wobble. I took a piece of roll cage tubing. As you can see, I faced it off in the lathe. So this and this is exactly the same. So when I put it here, and I'm going to use this right here as a bolt from a Volvo CV shaft, Ford CV shaft pretty much. And what I'm going to do is use a washer, and we're going to compress it. So it's not going to move whatsoever. That's the big thing, is having it not move. Until I can get this on. There we go. Make sure we're going to triple and triple check. Make sure our mark is on it there. There's going to be no gaps anywhere all the way through here. We need to get this exactly down to where we need it. And yeah, it looks pretty good right there. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. There it is. Tacked in 4 places. North, south, east, west. Let's put it on the car. clearances are set, top dead center mark is set, and I drilled a slight indentation inside this tooth in order to indicate that's the tooth for top dead center, plus I painted it. Because paint doesn't always last, that's the reason why I put a drill mark there. It's not going to affect the pickup because there's so much surface area of that tooth, it should be more than adequate. Next thing we got to do is I got to pull the intake manifold off, and we're going to redo the intercooler. Or not redo the intercooler, just the mounting portion of it. Really simple. Let me bring you over to the bench. Let me show you what I'm going to do. What do I have to do on the intercooler? Is these. This is what I have to redo. Why is that? Because you have to run through your mind when you are going to take this off. It's going to be in the car. And I noticed that getting this on and off if I had the constraints of being in the car, because there's a partial shelf right here, or a side shelf if you want to call it, in order to pull this thing off, these things are so long, and with me going in there, it just won't work. The only different thing is I just have to turn these around. That's it. So I can just undo these, pull it straight out. That way I can just go boop, right out like that. That's how easy it is. But seeing how, where am I going to put this? Seeing how I have to change these things around, I got to get some stuff to weld onto the intake manifold. So I got to pull this off, spin these around, and that way they can screw into an M6 receiver basically on that side and make sure nothing is conflicted. That's the only thing. I'll figure out how to do it. And then I got to change these things around with like a something or other. I'll figure out something. I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm making it up as I go along. So let me get I got my wrenches. We could just like pull this thing off and we will get this thing all squared away. Here's the intake manifold, ITBs, intercooler. Like I said before, we're just changing the studs around. So we have to there's two portions over here that we have to make threaded. Now, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can use a threaded insert tool, cut it, cramp it, stuff like that. I don't like threaded inserts because after a couple of years, they inevitably spin, because they get some corrosion on them, and what happens is, it just loosens up, and it's just a pain in the butt because you have to cut them off and redo them. And that's the reason why I pretty much refuse to use them on just about anything that's hard to get to. Oh, we can also use a speed nut, which is just a nut on the other side of a clip like this. But the problem is, what happens if it falls down and you're trying to put it back in a rush? It's just like, man, I don't like doing that either. So what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to weld lugs on here that are threaded. And you're probably saying, well, where do you get those? Well, you recycle them like a hillbilly that I am. This right here is part of the 3D intake manifold that I cut up for the Sport Quattro. Right here is just a lug with an M6 in it. I'm just going to cut this one off, use it on this one, I think. Also have this is the bottom of the intake manifold that I cut up for the rally car. Now, right here is an M6 already threaded. It's straight, and I'm just going to cut this off and use it on the other side of that. I mean, I think it's going to be okay. I won't know. Also, in order to, after I get those things cut, what I'm going to do is then put these, set them all up to see exactly where they're going to go, weld a washer onto the battery hold down. Then, after they're all in, I can screw them in, clamp everything together to make sure they're completely aligned, then weld them up. That's kind of my deal. All right, let me get my gear on so I can cut this stuff all up so we can make something work. I ramped everything going into the flange, so it, somewhat of an easy transition that goes in there. That's not too much of a problem. Just clean this stuff up, that's all, Try to do the best you can. All these pipes are a little bit larger than the originals, but they're pretty close anyway. What I'm going to do is I cut the mount off there because I'm not going to use that. I'm going to throw this back on the car, and then we're going to complete with all the stuff there for the oiling system for the turbocharger. Here's a feed line for the turbocharger. I have two ports, both dash 10, one down here and one down here. This assembly that's bolted on here is an old Alpine racing assembly that I just got off eBay for like 20 bucks because nobody wanted, because who else does this? But the whole thing is that, why did I elect to go with the center port, which is closer to the alternator, than this port? This port right here is the feed port. The feed port feeds hot, dirty oil to the oil filter and to the oil cooler. Now, my oil cooler, my remote mounted oil filter assembly has the provisions for the oil cooler, but it has a thermostat in it. So what does that mean? Well, when I have a thermostat in this oil is being pushed back through. When it's cold, it only 25% allows of flow to the oil cooler, just so it keeps it pressurized, but it doesn't overcool the oil. It allows the oil to warm up faster to operating temperature. And then when that thermostat opens up, it keeps it at a certain operating temperature. What is this port? This is the return port. The return port allows clean, cool, theoretically, clean, cool oil to come back. And that's what I want to pressurize the turbo with. Because if I can keep the oil cool enough within, right around operating temperature or cooler, by the time it gets to the turbo and back in, the journal bearings are just going to like me for it, especially when it's clean. Now, you might be wondering, what about oil starvation on startup? Generally, when these lines are full, it acts like a hydraulic line. When you push your brakes down, it's an instantaneous from your pedal to the brake caliper. Same thing. Yes, there'll be a little bit of a lag, but very little, and be even less of a lag with the Greddy remote mount filter assembly, because what I wanted that for was the oil thermostat. It only allows 25% of the oil to go through the oil cooler to allow it to maintain pressurization, so there's no pressure drop when it opens up, and also allows more pressure to come back to the motor. That's the thing is. So that's the reasoning behind me putting the oil feed line on the return line from the remote mounted filter assembly. And I'll show you all that when I dump this thing into the car. So, but all right, I'm gonna I'm gonna put the manifold on it in the intercooler, and we're gonna finish up the episode. We'll do a little bit of a how can I put this wrap up. All right, let me just get that. Boy, it's done. Well, for the most part. What don't I have done? The idle bypass warm-up regulator. I don't have that done. I'm not going to do a idle stabilization valve. I just want a bypass regulator because I don't run power steering. I'm not running an AC. I'm not running anything like that, so I don't need it. The big thing is that the majority of everything is done and it fits. And I can get it off easily, and nothing was harmed. Everything can be unbolted, and all the original stuff bolted back on, and that way you can have your original motor back in and all this other stuff and that awful CIS system. But all right, well, other than that, I'll stop my ranting. Exhaust manifold, $120. Intercooler, 40 bucks. I mean, I'm just saying this is the initial pieces. All the other stuff I just had lying around. And I'm not including the welding, of course, but the exhaust, I mean, the intake manifold, the ITBs are 30 bucks. This alternator I had, just bits and pieces of steel for the alternator mount. Same thing with this door threshold and the VR sensor from a Focus. The tooth wheel right here, the missing tooth wheel for the crankshaft, pretty much, you know, what, like $13 think I spent on it. Turbocharger's 100 bucks with all the stuff with it, 150, you know, for the back portion and for the oiling system and feed system. Other than that, I think it looks pretty cool. I mean, I think it looks wicked cool. I like it. You know, I mean, I'm going to move this thing off the bench and put an Audi motor here next, but it's going to be a little bit before it warms up enough for me to actually put this in the car to get the 5 cars away and all the ice and snow and my tractor started. But that's just one of the problems that you have living up here in the wilds of New Hampshire. Yeah, and yeah, made some tools. You know, the degree wheel and the bushing to make that sure that thing fits on there nice and straight. I cut that in the lathe, and this I didn't make this. This was it was like a Mercur engine mount limiter that I used to hold the dial indicator. But other than that, it's yeah. This is a hillbilly's guide to to making a CIS system into an EFI system. It's not the easiest route, but nothing was harmed, no parts were harmed, and I can bolt everything back on it as original if I need to. But this is for me, and that's it. Remember, you can do this. You can absolutely do this. I just, you know, take my theories and run with it. And make something better than what mine does. I mean, some of these welds you'll definitely do better, but it's other than that, it looks pretty cool. Oh, I welded on some just pieces of steel right here, some steel rod, just so I can get it on and off without having to use a wrench. That's it, you know. And all I'll do is, and I'm going to leave the coupling on, just use a screwdriver to pull the hose clamps off, and boom, we're done. So, but other than that, I think this is the end of this series until it warms up. And now the sad part is I got to go grind rust on the Audi rally car. It's like, oh, that's all going to be a long and involved process, but all right, I've been lazy enough by doing this and not doing that, so I got to do it. All right, well, thanks again for showing up. I really appreciate it. I hope you got a kick out of it. You know, who else is going to be doing this to an R5? You know, not very many people. Most people are really like, there's some awful snooty, stuck-up people out there. So you're not going to see them do this. But other than that, thank you very much for showing up. I really appreciate it. Remember, you can do this. Absolutely, you can do this. Just buy a welder. Go to the scrapyard. All right? Thanks. See you now. Bye.